Believe it or not, this pop-up Omnitrix is not 3D printed. It's 100% homemade with just cardboard, ballpen springs, a paper clip, and of course, the template I designed myself to make this build so much easier. Trust me guys, this isn't as complicated as it looks. In just 5 simple steps, you can also build this compact and functional Omnitrix with materials you probably already have at home. So, download the template, prepare your tools, and let's get started. For this build, I chose to print the template on a short-sized vellum board at 180 GSM. Personally, this thickness is just right because it's sturdy enough to hold its shape but still easy to glue onto cardboard. Thin paper can warp when wet with glue, which can ruin alignment later during assembly. Using thicker paper keeps the shape accurate, so I highly recommend you guys print yours similarly. For this step, you don't need to cut the shapes precisely. We'll be gluing them to cardboard, so the accurate cutting comes later on. For the cardboard, I use a chipboard that's about 1 mm thick, the same material as notebook covers, so you may recycle your old notebooks for this build if you want to. By the way, I glued some of the pieces while bending them onto the cardboard so they take on a curved shape. This makes it easier later when we turn them into a cylinder, a frustum, or other rounded parts. But this step is totally optional because once they're curved, cutting them becomes complicated. If you want to keep things simple, just glue everything flat. It's totally okay. Once you have glued all the pieces onto the cardboard, let the glue dry completely before cutting. I prefer thinner cardboard for this build because it's easier to cut precisely, which means fewer mistakes when tracing the template. But if you have a thicker cardboard, just remember that my template is based on the 1 mm cardboard I'm using. Here's an important tip: poke holes before cutting out the pieces. This is especially important for the small lever parts, since the hole sits right at the edge. If you cut the piece first and then poke the hole, it's very likely to tear. For larger pieces, I skip this step but still cut very carefully, so I still highly recommend making the holes first for all the pieces. Once you have all the pieces cut out, it's time to assemble the mechanism. First, let's build the casing. Glue the A1 pieces and the B2 pieces in pairs. Take 3 B1 pieces and glue them to the bottom of the B2 pair. Then attach the A1 pair to the very bottom of that stack. Before the glue fully sets, check that the holes line up and remove excess glue that might block them. Stack 6 M1 pieces like so, then add 2 M2 pieces on top. When gluing the M2 on top of M1, make sure the square compartment is positioned on your left. You will need 2 of these stacks, 1 for each side of the Omnitrix. Now glue the M1 pieces to the stack we made earlier. Align them carefully as shown in the video. Then, glue another pair of B2 on top and finish with a pair of B1 above that. When it's all glued together, the base should look like a layered compartment ready to house the mechanism. For each lever, stack 7 identical pieces. Cardboard alone can be floppy, so I reinforce the edges with a tiny amount of super glue to harden the stack. But don't overdo it, too much will thicken the stack and cause binding later. For the buttons, also stack 7 pieces together. You should test the fit in the case as you go. If the button feels too tight, trim off the sides or remove one layer. If it's too loose, just add a thin shim or another layer. You want a smooth, slightly resistant click, not wobbly nor stuck. Once you're satisfied, glue a T1 piece onto this part of the button. It works like a stopper, keeping the button in place. Now let's start with the watch core. Glue the ends of this piece together to form a cylinder. Since this part will be springing in and out of the watch, I decided to print it on photo paper and covered it with laminating film. This keeps it safe from getting scratched and also make it look more vibrant. Now glue the F1 piece to the bottom of the cylinder. Make sure that the F1 stops before the 2 protruding alignment tabs. Those tabs need to stay exposed. On each side, add 2 R1 pieces stacked behind the tabs. Apply a tiny amount of super glue there to strengthen it. You should be able to slide this piece into the case smoothly. If it doesn't, you may need to redo the core piece and make it a bit slimmer. Now this is a ballpoint spring pin I don't use anymore. Grab the spring and cut it to the lengths shown in the template. We'll be putting each of the springs in this tiny compartment in the mechanism. When assembling the mechanism, place the button in its slot first. Grab the lever piece and pay attention to the orientation I'm about to place it to. The taller tail will push the button out while the opposite side will rest against the spring. But first, take a jumbo paper clip and remove the plastic layer. This will be used to secure the lever piece in place. Use a bit of force to slide the lever into place and carefully pin it into the case. The lever should be able to press the button and spring back freely. Repeat the same step on the other side and you'll end up with 2 satisfying clickable buttons. Now let's see if it will fit the mechanism. While pushing both buttons, insert the core in place. The square openings should align with the lever pieces. This way, we'll be able to push the buttons freely just as shown. Alright, let's continue. For the pop-up core system, I grabbed another couple of springs from a bigger ballpoint pen. I cut 2 bits of the ink chamber, then anchored the springs onto the Z1 piece where the template indicates. When the glue has dried, take the cross piece and glue the springs on each side like so. To make it more secure, I superglued micro cardboard bits surrounding the top part of the spring. Then, add the Z2 rings over the assembly like so. As you can see, I needed to chip the cross edges a little bit so that it fits perfectly under the core. Once that's done, we can proceed to building the other parts of the Omnitrix. To make the watch dial, shape this strip into a frustum by gluing the edges into a truncated cone. Take the F2 piece and secure it at the center with super glue. Then, glue the R2 pieces around the dial following the printed guidelines. These become the dial ridges. Now make a smaller cylinder using C1 and C2. This will let the dial twist smoothly on the core. For the watch strap, bend these pieces ahead of time so they form a natural curve of your wrist. Adjust the strap length to your wrist before gluing S2 on top of S1. As you can see, I've already cut away this part of the strap to make space for the magnets. When inserting neodymium magnets, test the polarity before gluing. Place the magnets on the 2 strap ends and make sure they attract and not repel. Personally, I recommend testing the strap pieces on your wrist first. Now glue the A2 pieces together and attach the A3 pieces on top, following the puzzle-like alignment marked on the template. This forms the outer case of the mechanism. For the crowns, I reused bits of old marker pens, cut them to length and stuffed an EVA foam to cover the hole. Now that all pieces are ready, it's time to bring out the Omnitrix to life. I first wrapped a thin strip of black EVA foam around the centerpiece to hide raw cardboard edges. I then cut thin cardboard strips for the remaining exposed edges and glued them down. Take note how I'm leaving some space at the top strip since we'll need to glue the A2 pieces here later. Everything was then painted with green and kept the center strip black. The side sections were also painted with dark silver for a contrasting metallic look. For the A2 piece, I glued tiny black strips into the grooves to make the details pop. I also covered up the edge of the button pieces with cardboard to make it look clean. For the watch core, I painted this area around the opening black and covered it up with a small piece of cardboard. This makes it look seamless and hides the internal opening. When that's all glued, I finally attached the smaller cylinder into the center of the core. I then took out these pieces to spray paint. When spray painting, make sure to use thin, even coats and allow each coat to dry before applying the next to avoid drips. For the watch strap, I glued thin EVA foam strips on top of the cardboard to give it a soft, professional finish. I also painted the backside of the straps with black to make it look neater. Now we're down to the final step. Insert the button and springs into the compartments. Place the lever in place and secure it with the pin. Do this for the other side and they should snap back cleanly. Slide the core into the mechanism, aligning the square openings with the lever tails. You should hear a couple of clicks if the lever is seated correctly. Once everything lines up, apply super glue onto the ring area. Then, gently press the mechanism into the bottom platform. Hold it steady until the glue sets enough to keep the parts from shifting. Be very careful with glue here, any excess may flow into the pop-up area and might jam the core. When that's all set, glue the A2 piece on top. Make sure that the glue doesn't drip into the core or button areas so it doesn't ruin the mechanism. Place the dial onto the core and glue the watch face onto the smaller cylinder. Make sure that the watch face is centered and sits flush. I then superglued the watch strap onto the bottom part of the Omnitrix like so. I also added these creases with a ruler for added detail on the strap. Finally, I carved out this tiny recess where the watch crowns sit. After countless redesigns, a handful of prototypes, and a calloused pair of hands from all the cutting, finally, our Ben 10 Alien Force Omnitrix is complete. I've been crafting a lot of DIY Omnitrix in this channel, and I can confidently say that this Alien Force Omnitrix is the best DIY I've made so far. So if you want to make this, click the link in the description and grab a copy of the template. I believe that is all for this video, so thank you guys for watching.